The oldest writing our species ever produced contains a claim so strange, most people simply set it aside. Long before the pyramids, before the first kings anyone can name, the Sumerians pressed their words into wet clay. And somewhere in that clay, according to a story that has never fully died, is a list of 7 hidden places. Not temples, not cities. 7 strongholds, the account says, built by the ones the old texts called the Anunnaki, the beings the first people of Mesopotamia believed had come down from somewhere else. And all 7 were set down in the same impossible location. Beneath the oceans, sealed under deep water where no eye was ever meant to follow. 6 of those drowned places seem lost for good, too deep, too far, too dark to ever reach. But the same tablet carries one detail that refuses to stay quiet. One of the 7 lies far closer than the others. One of them may be the closest to being found. And tonight, slowly and without any hurry, we're going to go looking for it. To understand why anyone would sink such things below the waves in the first place, you have to meet the people who told these tales, and the god they handed the deep to. The Sumerians lived in the warm, flat country where 2 great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, ran down toward the Gulf. Above them stretched the sky and its many gods. But the water below the world belonged to one figure alone. His name was Enki, and his home was called the Abzu, the sweet, hidden reservoir they imagined lying beneath the solid ground, the source from which every spring and well was fed. They did not keep this belief as a distant idea either. In their holiest city, they raised a temple to Enki and named it the house of that very reservoir, building it above the spot where they felt the underground water pressed nearest to the surface. To step into that shrine was, in their minds, to stand at the mouth of the deep itself, at the exact seam where the buried ocean met the world of the living. The priests tended pools there, kept sacred water close, and treated the boundary between dry ground and hidden flood as the most charged place a person could stand. What matters is which way their belief pointed. For these people, the most valuable things did not fall from overhead. They welled up from underneath. Wisdom came out of the water. The first crafts, the earliest laws, the very idea of living together in ordered towns, all of it, in their telling, rose from below rather than descending from above. Enki kept that submerged store, the patient one who dwelt where light could not travel, releasing the secrets of civilized life one measured gift at a time. He was not a god of storms or of war. He was the quiet one, the clever one, the keeper of what lay out of sight. And the people loved him for it, because the things he guarded were the things that made them who they were. So a story about concealed places under the sea does not push against Sumerian thinking. It rests comfortably inside it. To a mind raised on the Abzu, the notion that something powerful and deliberate might wait below the waterline would not have seemed like invention. It would have felt almost obvious, an extension of what these people already sensed, that the depths both conceal and preserve whatever shaped us. Where we look at the ocean and see a blank, they looked at it and saw a vault. Now, a plain word of caution is owed, because it sits at the heart of a subject like this. No shelf anywhere holds a single tidy object that spells out 7 marine fortresses by name and map reference. What survives instead is a scattering of older notions that, laid side by side, begin to suggest a shape. A grouping of 7 turns up again and again across these first cities. 7 sages, 7 gates, 7 divisions of the world below. The figure haunts their thinking the way a returning dream haunts a sleeper, surfacing in their prayers, their spells, and their maps of the unseen. It helps to remember what their writing actually was. They did not scratch letters the way we do. They pushed the cut end of a reed into damp clay, leaving small wedge-shaped dents. And from those simple marks, they built an entire record of a civilization. Its debts and its gods, its harvests and its fears. Clay is humble stuff, but it lasts. Baked hard or simply dried in the sun and buried, a tablet can outlive empires, waiting in the ground for thousands of years with its message intact. That is how a claim this old reaches us at all. Not through some grand monument, but through a broken palmful of fired earth that happened to survive when almost everything around it turned to dust. And because so much survived, and so much was copied and recopied across centuries, ideas drifted and blurred as they passed from one scribe to the next. A phrase written in one place might be softened in another, a number changed, a name lost. This is part of why the seven feel more like a rumor than a receipt. They come to us worn smooth by handling, the way a stone in a river loses its edges, still recognizably itself, but no longer sharp enough to prove. Reading the so-called list, then, is less like unrolling a chart and more like watching a form gather out of fog. The seven arrive not as a stamped inventory, but as an impression pressed across many records, a hint, repeated by different hands in different ages, that the deep had been portioned out, each share set apart, each one guarded. And so our path tonight takes on its own quiet shape. We will visit all seven, but the way sinks lower as it goes, growing colder and stranger with every stop, until we reach the last, which does not behave like the rest at all. The first waits in the great trench of the Pacific, where the ocean plunges to its lowest reach and the floor falls away into a blackness sunlight has never entered. This is spoken of as the eldest, the anchor beneath everything. Dormant and cold, whatever it once served, the feeling of it now is pure stillness. Something shut down ages ago and abandoned to the crushing quiet. So far below that the water itself presses upon it like a closed palm. Down there the cold is total, and the pressure would flatten anything we could build. And perhaps that was the point. To place the first and heaviest of the seven where nothing living would ever wander close, guarded not by walls, but by depth alone. Turn west, and the second sits inside the narrow throat of the Red Sea, close to the tight strait where two landmasses lean toward one another. If the first is a resting place, this one gives the sense of a threshold, a way through, a passage set at the point where a slim channel joins one great body of water to the next. Vessels have crossed above it for uncounted centuries without a single glance downward. There is something fitting in that. A gateway needs a narrow point to guard. And here the map itself pinches tight, as if the water were funneling every traveler across a single hidden doorstep they never knew was beneath their keel. For all the ships that have slipped through that strait, carrying spices and armies and pilgrims across the ages, not one crew ever suspected what the old story says was resting in the dark below their hulls. The third belongs to the gray and restless North Sea. And here the account brushes against something entirely real. Beneath those cold northern waters lies a drowned country that once teemed with life, a stretch of low hills, rivers, and hunting grounds where people genuinely walked before the rising tide swallowed it whole. Over that vanished land, the story sets a sealed archive, a keeping place of memory that went under along with the ground it stood upon, waiting patient beneath the churn. That drowned country is no invention either. Fishing boats working those waters have hauled up the bones of animals that once roamed dry plains there. And here and there, the crude tools of the people who hunted them. Proof that families lived, ate, and were buried on ground, now hidden fathoms below the waves. If any of the 7 were meant to hold records rather than power, this is where you would put them, above a landscape that already proved how completely the sea can take a world and keep it, hidden but not destroyed, resting under the silt as if merely asleep. Far to the southeast rests the 4th, above the wide, shallow shelf that once bound the islands of the Indonesian world into one broad plain. Warm water covers it today, yet here too the sea claimed dry earth. This one is described as a place of making, a workshop of sorts. Lying over terrain, the ocean climbed across slowly as it drowned open ground and low forest alike. Where the northern site keeps and the eldest sleeps, this one built. A warm, shallow cradle far from prying eyes, the kind of sheltered water where something could be shaped and tested in peace, then left behind when the tide rose and the work was done. The 5th waits in the middle of the Atlantic, along the ridge that splits that ocean down its length. Here the impression turns outward, a beacon, a relay, something that once reached past the water and the world entirely, fixed along the great seam where the seafloor forever pulls itself apart. It is the loneliest of the group, set not near any coast, but in the open middle of a vast sea, on the one line of the planet that is always moving, always splitting, always young. A signal placed there would speak to no one nearby. It would speak upward and away, into whatever lay beyond the sky. Deep in the Indian Ocean lies the 6th. And of them all, this one feels the most alert, not a doorway, not a forge, not a signal, but a watcher. A silent post placed in the vastness, turned toward the surface, waiting without impatience for something it alone was told to expect. There is a patience to it that unsettles more than the others, because a watcher implies a thing being watched for, and a thing being watched for implies that whoever set it there believed one day it would come. The other 5 have the stillness of the finished. This one has the stillness of the ready. 6 places, then, across 6 waters, each carrying its own weight and its own reason, no 2 alike. Yet all 6 share a single trait the 7th does not. Every one of them lies far beyond us, in trenches we cannot enter, under pressures we can barely endure, over floors we have scarcely charted. They are lost in the fullest meaning of the word. The 7th is another matter, and we are nearly to it. But first, a gentler question deserves a moment of its own. Why 7? Why forever this figure, and why always bound to the water? Here the old records offer something worth pausing over. Among the most enduring Sumerian tales are the Apkallu, 7 sages said to have risen from the sea in the earliest days, part man and part fish in the oldest descriptions, sent to teach a young species the arts of living. Pictures of them survive, carved into stone, bearded figures wrapped in the body of a great fish, half stepping from the waves, half still belonging to them. They gave writing, farming, the raising of buildings, the shape of ordered life. They taught how to measure a field, how to read the turning of the year, how to build a city that would last. Then, their task complete, they slipped back into the depths they had come from. 7 teachers, drawn up out of the water to lift a fledgling world, then folding away beneath it. Set that beside the tale we are tracing, and a soft echo begins to sound. 7 sages emerging from the sea, 7 strongholds hidden under it. This is not proof, and it would be dishonest to dress it up as such. Yet you can feel the 2 ideas reaching toward each other across the ages, as though the later account of buried strongholds were a shadow thrown by the older memory of buried teachers. Perhaps the ancient mind, straining to explain where its knowledge had truly begun, kept circling the same answer without meaning to, that whatever raised us did so from below and left a trace of itself behind when it withdrew. Legend or recollection? The line between the two has never run thinner than it does right here. And it is worth remembering that the people who told both stories saw no wall between them at all. To them, the teachers and their hidden homes were parts of a single truth, told in different keys. Which carries us, at last, to the seventh. And to grasp why this one sits so much nearer to discovery than its six companions, we return to where we began, to the warm river country of the Sumerians, and to the waters of the Persian Gulf that touch the edge of their world. The Gulf we know now is a shallow arm of the sea. It was not always so. During the last long age of ice, when so much of the planet's water lay locked in frozen sheets and the oceans hung far lower than today, the bed of the Gulf was not underwater at all. It was open, livable land, a broad, gentle valley fed by the rivers running down through it, mild and green while much of the wider world stayed harsh. People could have made their homes there. By every reasonable measure, they very likely did. Picture it as it might have been. A long, sheltered lowland, threaded by fresh water, warmer and kinder than the lands around it. Exactly the sort of place people would gather and stay. Then the ice loosened, and the sea began to climb. It did not come as a wave or a flood in a single night. It came slowly, a little more each year, a shoreline creeping inland so gradually that no single person would have marked the change. Yet across the span of many lifetimes, whole stretches of that valley went under. A family's fishing spot became open water. A path that once led somewhere now ended at the shallows. Field by field, hearth by hearth, the water spread over that valley, drowning it stretch by stretch, pushing whatever lived there upward and inland toward the higher ground where the first Sumerian cities would one day stand. It is not hard to imagine such a slow swallowing living on in memory, handed down until it hardened into a story of a world that was lost beneath the water. And of those cities, the very oldest that these people named in their own accounts was Eridu, the place they called the first of all, the seat of Enki himself, the god of the deep, whose home lay in the hidden water. In their reckoning, civilization did not begin somewhere abstract. It began here at the edge of the drowned country, in the city of the god of the deep. Sit with the shape of that a moment. The earliest city the Sumerians remembered stood at the rim of a sea that had lately swallowed a whole inhabited land. Its guardian was the god of the waters below. And the seventh stronghold in our tale is placed exactly here, on the drowned bed of the Gulf. Near that ancient shoreline, beneath the very water Enki was said to rule. Every thread of the story ties itself to this one spot. The god, the flood, the first city, and the last of the seven, all gathered at a single shallow stretch of sea. This is why it counts as the nearest. The other six lie in the unreachable dark, in the deepest trench, along the loneliest ridge, across floors we have barely started to map. The seventh rests in shallow, warm, heavily crossed water, over ground that human beings genuinely once walked, in a sea traveled daily by countless vessels and surveyed more thoroughly than almost any other on Earth. It does not shelter behind miles of crushing weight. It hides only behind a thin skin of silt and the simple fact that no one has thought to search in quite the right spot. Ships pass over it. Nets drag near it. The water above it is warm enough to swim in. Of all seven, This is the one modern eyes have very nearly passed over without noticing. The one that might reveal itself not through some impossible plunge into the abyss, but through an ordinary survey in familiar water on an unremarkable day. And were it found, were something deliberate and old ever truly lifted from that silt, what then? It is worth wondering gently what such a thing would overturn. So much of what we hold about our own origins rests on the assumption that the story opens with the earliest cities we can dig from the dirt and reaches back no further than the soil beneath them. A drowned stronghold near Eridu, tied to the memory of teachers from the sea, would ask us to look past that boundary, to consider that the water might be holding a chapter written before the one we call the start. It would mean the people who spoke of gods rising from the deep were not simply dreaming, but remembering. It would mean the ocean has been keeping a record all along, and we had merely stopped believing there was anything down there to read. And yet notice how carefully the story guards itself against that very hope. 6 of the 7 are placed exactly where no one could ever check, in the crushing trench, the lonely ridge, the unmapped dark. Only the 7th is set within reach. And even that one hides under silt and indifference rather than out in the open. It is almost as if the tale wants to stay a tale, near enough to tempt, far enough to never quite settle the matter. That balance is what has kept it alive. A story fully proven becomes a fact and loses its pull. A story fully impossible is simply dismissed. This one lives in the narrow band between, where the mind can neither prove it nor let it go. And so it drifts down the centuries, from clay to voice to the quiet you are lying in now. Yet it stays unfound. Perhaps because the Gulf's bed, shallow though it is, lies under a soft blanket of sediment that guards its secrets well. Perhaps because no one hunts for a thing they have already decided is merely a story. Perhaps because the truth of it, if a truth is there, is patient in the way the deep is patient, content to wait a while longer under the warm and ordinary surface. We cannot say. And that not knowing is not the tale's weakness, but the whole of its quiet strength. 6 held far off in the dark, and one resting so near that a single careful look in the right direction might change everything, or nothing whatsoever. If you have drifted this far with me, into the still water and the old questions that live down there, you may wish to stay for the journeys still ahead. So settle in and follow along whenever the deep calls again. For now, let the search rest. Let the 6 remain where they lie, in their trenches and ridges and drowned northern fields, untroubled and unseen. Let the 7th keep its shallow place beside the shore of the first city, waiting under the soft gray silt with all the patience of the god once said to dwell below. And let yourself rise back toward the surface of this long night the way you sank into it. Without hurry, without struggle, the weight of the water easing away, the dark turning soft and warm around you. The question needs no answer tonight. It only needs to drift, somewhere down where the light gives out and the silt lies undisturbed, holding whatever it holds. Somewhere below, the sea keeps its oldest secret close, and you, at last, can let it.